Welcome back, everybody, to the Selling Fort Collins podcast. I am here with local restaurateur Gerard Boyle. Gerard, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate you being here. Let's get right into it. What brought you to Fort Collins?
I actually, like a lot of folks, I finished up my schooling at Colorado State, and kind of you get into your social circles and meet some friends and kind of start throwing down some roots. And then, just stayed and started working in the restaurant business.
Did you meet your wife there?
I did. Yeah. We met at CB Potts on Elizabeth. It was, CB Potts was such a really cool restaurant and bar. It was a block and a half off campus. And when I moved out here, I was not in the restaurant business, and I was trying to get a job, living with a high school friend, and applied at a few places around town, but got hired at the Armadillo, which is now the Elizabeth Hotel.
Yeah.
And worked for the Lucios for probably 3 years. But during that time, my favorite place to go to get a beer and wings and watch a game was CB Potts on Elizabeth. And so I applied there in it was probably like October.
What year was that?
Oh, 1992. Okay. Thank you for bringing my age out on that quickly. Let's just get it out there. But 92, and then finally got a call back the week before spring break in 93. And they said, "You still looking for a job?" And I'm thinking, you got a lot of people going away for spring break.
What job was this that you applied?
It was as a server at CB Potts. Yeah. So I was waiting tables at CB Potts, and then did that throughout college. And met my wife there. She came out, and she was going to Florida State, Michelle. And her summers, she would come back and stay with her folks. And then she got a job hosting and serving over at CB Potts, and got a chance to meet her. And the rest on that's history. But it's funny how the restaurant business can, I'm not the only one. There's a lot of folks that met their significant other in a restaurant or bar and working together. So
right. So that was the start of it. So early 90s, CB and Potts. And then, you really worked your way up at CB and Potts quickly. It seems to me.
And I had, when I started there, I had some restaurant experience at the Armadillo, which was a Mexican restaurant in town. And the Lucios, Brendan, Richard Lucio owned that. And it's kind of funny because fast forward now, and we're actually neighbors with restaurants down at Penrose and their place down at the Exchange.
Right. Vatos Tacos.
Vatos, yeah. Mm-hmm. And, it's funny because now I see their son is in the business, and it just does kind of like it just seems like everything moves really quick. But learned a lot from them. And then at CB Potts, I worked there for quite a while through college. And when I graduated, I had some other job interviews and sales and stuff. And I talked to Kevin Sheasley, who was the local owner for CB Potts. And he said, "Why don't you come work for us and kind of get into some management and stuff?" And probably for the next, 12 or 14 years, I worked for that company. And Kevin was hands down, learned so much from him. He's a numbers guy and a hospitality guy and a great restaurant operator. He now owns the CB Potts at Collindale, and we still talk business and everything else, but he's a great friend and owe a lot to him. He's a great mentor for me.
Yeah. So one of your mentors. What was the restaurant scene like? Take us back to the 90s. People coming to Fort Collins now, they see Old Town, they see all the restaurants. They see, the great places to go have a drink, to have coffee, to have brunch. You go down to the South Side, and, that's really filled in. That's become a lot more densely populated with great restaurants. Yeah. But back in the 90s, a little bit of a different story, fair to say?
I would agree with that. I think at the beginning of the 90s, for me, the edge of town was probably Drake going south because we had the County Cork was over there by the railroad tracks. Mulligan's was a great little pub.
Oldies.
I love that place. But it was like the newest place out there was probably the Olive Garden, which it still is today. So that's the south of Drake. But you also had, the places like CB Potts were just a very small town feel. I don't know that there were a ton of chains out here back in those days. I remember going to Charcoal Broiler and thinking it was
Still
just
there.
I mean, it's still there.
That was the top recommendation. If you listen to the podcast with Ann Hutchison,
Is that right?
President of the Chamber of Commerce in Fort Collins, her favorite restaurant that she called out was Charcoal
Broiler. So they're doing something right.
They're doing something right.
I think they're over 50 years.
Yes,
yeah,
they are.
So, but a lot of the places, it was just a different time because there was a few things that were included in a restaurant experience and a few things that weren't. The things that were included, there was smoking inside still. So it's hard to wrap your head around it right now and be like, wait a minute, we were cleaning out ashtrays, but smoking was only in the bar, even though the dining room was 10 feet away. Right, it was just a different time. So that was a good improvement to eliminate the smoking. And then the cell phones. There was no social media. There was no reviews of your business immediately tableside.
Maybe more conversation.
There was more conversation. I mean, and it's funny because there's, couples that I used to serve that were dating who are now married with children. And to me, that's kind of like what the restaurant business is about. It's the hospitality and providing a great environment for people to, celebrate and have special occasions or create relationships or get to know people or, make business deals. All those things happen over a meal or a beverage. And that's really like what the hospitality business boils down to for me. But it was definitely a different scene back then. Yeah. Yeah.
So CB Potts, that, gave way to, you did some other things in the restaurant world too, before you went on to, be the founder, with partners,
right?
DC Oakes and the Penrose. So explain that journey a little bit, because it gets really entrepreneurial here. And I think there's kind of a cool, inspiring story there.
Yeah.
It's very Fort Collins.
It is. And I think sometimes you need to leave to really kind of appreciate what you have. And so I was working at CB Potts and I went to work in Denver. And I went to work in Denver in 1997, the week before the flood, which came right down Elizabeth and just totally swamped Potts.
What year was that?
That was 97.
Okay.
And so I was working down at the Denver Tech Center Potts, which is kind of kitty corner from Fiddler's Green. Right. And it was, at the time, there was no Park Meadows Mall. So, on any given night, you got Avalanche players, Rockies players, Broncos players in there. It was really like the place to be. And it was a large restaurant, 15,000 square feet, was just in the heart of the tech center. So even, you open up at 11 o'clock and at 11:20, you're already, close to being on a wait. It was pretty amazing. So you get to learn a lot, and working for Potts was great because they're a large family-owned restaurant company. So at that time, they probably had 30 restaurants, and they were expanding. They were expanding into Illinois, Chicago land area, Indianapolis, and growing their other regions, including Colorado. And when you're creating that growth and scale of your business, changing the price of a soda 10 cents for a single operator doesn't drop a whole lot to the bottom line. When you multiply that by your 30 restaurants, there's a difference maker there. Yeah. So learning how just like, the power of scaling things worked was important, but they were also a very numbers driven company. So you learned how to be efficient with labor and cost of goods and all your budgets and so forth, and continue to improve on hospitality, make sure the place is kept up and you have, a great guest experience. As I kind of started getting my feet under me at CB Potts, there was an opportunity to move to Indianapolis and be a GM of a restaurant out there. And so with our company, it was called the Ram out there, and which is funny coming from Colorado or Fort Collins.
Coincidentally,
the Ram, yeah. So, but it's downtown, right in the middle of downtown Indianapolis, and that's a convention city. So there was something that's kind of like a new component that I was, figuring out and working with. And then we were there 10 months, and they said, hey, we want you to be the regional manager for Chicago and Indianapolis. So that was at the time 3 restaurants. One was under construction. And so that was a challenge to kind of get less hands off and really try to figure out how to do more through others. So that was a great learning experience.
I'm going to pause right there because, one thing that comes to mind when a challenge being a little bit more hands off, I remember, a project that I was involved in from the ground up was Harmony Commons in Southeast Fort Collins, and, DC Oakes, the main restaurant there, the main driver for traffic there, one of your concepts in Fort Collins. And I remember early on, I was in the parking lot, and it was before lunchtime, a while before lunchtime. And I saw someone in the parking lot picking up trash. And I looked, it's like, is that Gerard? I looked, and it was you,
Gerard.
And it was you. And it was inspiring because I thought every single detail, like that is someone who is hands-on. So knowing a little bit about you, seeing, how you see that inside your restaurants too, by the way, like everything is dialed, everything is clean. Everything is just the customer experience. You're like the Danny Meyer of Fort Collins in my mind.
I don't think so, but
thank you. I would say that's the best comp. It's so had to be challenging for you, a huge change to be like hands off.
Sure. Yeah. And there's never, I do worry about, or not worry about them, pay attention to the details because I think it's important for a guest experience. But going to a position where time was so valuable, I could not afford to sweep the front steps every day or, at 4 restaurants. So learning how to get more done through others was a great learning experience for me. And it wasn't always easy, but the good lessons aren't. And so eventually while we were in Chicago and Indianapolis, that was about 4-year period of time, but we had our 2 oldest boys were born, one in Indianapolis, one in Chicago. And, I was working a lot. Michelle we didn't have family out there. She joined some moms groups and was trying to make friends, but man, it is gray almost every day out there. It is. Yeah. Summers are great, but it was just, those winters are long and hard and they can kind of get lonely. And so we decided to move back to Colorado, and, CB Potts they were great to me. They said, hey, we have a guy that wants to go out there. He'll take your job. You can come back, take his job. I was back at the tech center and also working at Fort Collins Potts with Kevin again, and a lot of great people. And so we ended up, doing that for a bit. And then I can just kind of fast forward a little bit. Kevin got bought out. I was the regional manager for Potts, and I think we had 5 restaurants in our region at the time, 4 in Denver and then Fort Collins. And I thought, maybe I ought to give this a crack myself. And
what year was this? When did this hit you? I want to try this.
Yeah, I think, I guess got to do the math backwards here. Probably 13 years ago. Okay. So, and that seems like it was yesterday to me. It really seems like it was yesterday, but I knew I had to give a year away from Potts before I could, think about getting into my own business, or even looking at, collaborating with anybody I'd worked with at Potts. And so I ended up working for a company down in Denver, 6 months there, worked down on Colfax Avenue, which is a change. It was great. It was definitely in the city, and all the color and flavor that goes with that. But that was just kind of getting to be too much of a grind with my family. It was just, the kids were at a certain age, and Rick Callen called me probably around St. Patrick's Day and said, hey, you know anyone that's looking for a job as a GM? We need one at the Sonny Lubick Steakhouse. And I said, oh, matter of fact, I do.
It's interesting what a small town this is for those listening. RC's my neighbor.
Oh, is he really?
So it's just, it's a big place.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
But it's a small place.
Yeah.
So he gave you a call about.
So he called me and I said, actually, I do. And I started there on April 1st. Probably, I can't really do the math, maybe 2013 or 2012. And I worked there for 4 years, and that was one of the best learning experience I had in the restaurant business, because I had never worked in a steakhouse or fine dining.
You made it great.
It really, I think we kind of like pulled off of each other's energy and talents. Had an awesome chef, TR, who's actually the chef at the Country Club now. And the staff there was some of the best servers I've worked with. And there was one thing in particular that I just always talk to whenever we hire somebody. I still tell them the story, but I had started April 1st and I said, we probably need to have a staff meeting about a month in. So, kind of everyone can see where I'm coming from and know about me. And so we had this exercise that we had done at Potts on a smaller scale, but you just talk about each point of contact a guest might have. So it might be checking out your website or, phone call, coming in the front door, there's cigarette butts there, or did the owner sweep them up? And so, you can go through these points of contact with a guest where they may be making a conscious judgment or forming an opinion about your business, or it might be unconscious. It might be picking up the linen silverware and feeling, oh, this is heavy, And to my oldest son always gives me a hard time. He's like, Dad, got heavy silverware here. This is going to be a good restaurant experience. And anyways, we're going through this whole thing with the staff. And I said, well, so everyone, they got the coat check. They're coming to grab their coat out of coat check. Well, how would you engage someone? And one of the staff members said, well, you could pretend you care about how their meal was and ask them how their meal was. And one of the servers said, or you could just really care about it. And I was like, the light went on, and I just, because sometimes, it's just that simple. You just have to care what you're doing. Yeah. But those guys cared. Those men and women that I worked with there, they cared. They were very proud to work at Sonny's, and it was a small staff, so it was very tight knit. But I loved working there and seeing just like the kind of gentle salesmanship that some of these servers had, and an ability to read guests or find out what they wanted, not what we wanted to sell them. What kind of experience, did you come in for? And they had just a way of like drawing it out of people. So it was great
moment, the perfect timing for coming up to me and asking, would you like another martini? Like just that perfect moment, like knowing that it's a skill.
Yeah, it is. It's a skill. And it's also gave me a lot of gratitude to work there and appreciation, because it's not an inexpensive place to dine. It's got some of the best. The beef program was the best in town. The seafood was remarkable. Our chef and the whole team of folks he had with him really crafted some meals that you were willing to pay for.
Absolutely.
But the reality is, a lot of people can only afford to go there one time a year for a special occasion. And so we have to make sure that we deliver on every other part of that experience. And so that gave me a lot of gratitude when people chose Sonny's. And that's something that I took from Sonny's and brought to DC Oakes and Penrose. And for anyone that walks through the door, I have a tremendous amount of gratitude and appreciation, because they chose to come to our restaurants and employ 100 people to pay us to keep our livelihoods afloat. And that's probably like one of the greatest lessons there.
It seems like it's also designed to be a place that you want to go to a couple times a week or at least a couple times a month.
At Penrose and Oakes?
Yeah. We're talking about the Penrose and Oakes. Yeah.
And I think, we've done a good job about like really being cognizant of like where we fall in with pricing, menu pricing. We could probably charge more but I think it's just keeps the repeat. There's a little bit of trust we've built in with our guests. So,
I'm going to tell you why I go there, because I think other people, probably, and if you're listening to this, a lot of people listening to the show, or Fort Collins is really on their radar, a place they're seriously considering, moving to, or maybe they've moved here recently. If they already live here, they're still probably, to a large degree discovering the restaurant scene. And, I go there for lunch because, the service, it's not only friendly, as you mentioned, it's also quick. So I walk in and, if you want to go really healthy, like I generally like to go pretty healthy. I'm going to go the salmon salad. If I'm feeling like, I want a little something else, I'm going to go the buffalo melt, and I'm going to get like the fries with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a really nice variety there, all very reasonably priced. And, if it's dinner time, we have a 5 and a 7-year-old, as you know, and there are not places that we want to take them, not because, these other restaurants are snobby. That's not it. Everything's down to earth and approachable, even at the higher price points in Fort Collins. However, they just haven't thought this out like you all have. The kids, they're getting like free ice cream at the end
they get
of their meal, a scoop, which is all they need, by the way. A scoop.
Yeah.
Brilliant. The chicken tenders, the kids' meals, it's just, the stuff they bring out for them to color. It keeps them occupied. It's a perfect amount of
goldfish.
time.
You get a little.
I forgot about the goldfish. You do. You get a dish of goldfish. So, just some reasons for you all who are listening. We're talking. That's whether it's the Penrose in Old Town or DC Oakes in Southeast Fort Collins, they've got it dialed in.
Yeah, and I have some great partners. My partner Steve Booth, he runs Penrose. Tony Gray is our chef. He's a lifelong chef. TJ Compton's a brewer, and he's been brewing beer for 20 plus years professionally. So they're all, just the best at what they do. And we don't all walk around locked arm in arm and, have the same opinion. There's some, we have some great discussions, especially at the outset, trying to figure out, hey, what's the best way to build our brand, and how do we want to, come across, and where do we want the prices to be? And do we want
some details? Give me an example. Where did a healthy debate take place? I'm curious because it seems to have landed in such a great place.
Yeah. And I learned that from Kevin. Kevin and I used to battle. We'd drive down to Denver once a week, same car. He'd pick me up. We'd get a coffee, 7:00, and we'd get home probably at 9 or 10. But we had a lot of great conversations and disagreements. But when you have disagreements, you're able to talk through it with an open mind and see some different points of view. Usually you can get to a spot that is sensible for the business. And so one of the things that we have 3 touch points at DC Oakes and Penrose. Is it good for the business? Is it good for our guests? And is it good for the staff? So when we answer yes to all 3 of those, then that's kind of a no-brainer. But I think, it's just trying to start a restaurant that no one knows. No one knows what the brand is. We probably had over 200 names for our restaurant that we were trying to figure out what are we going to call this? What are we going to call it? What are we going to call it? And so lots of healthy discussion on that. But it was even, here's a good one. Hopefully I'm not pulling the curtain back too hard, but at Potts, the staff never had their own restroom out back. They were always in the public restrooms. And when I worked at Sonny's, there was a private restroom, and I thought, you know what? I love that, because you're never going to see anybody that is taking care of your table in a restaurant. And one of my partners was like, it's pretty expensive to build that restroom when we're building out. And so I think what actually happened, I said, it kind of got to a vote, and we had 3 guys said, we think we need it. And one guy said, okay, I don't think we do, but I'm in. And the next restaurant we did had an employee bathroom. So
I love that.
It was something and that's one of those things, guests might not know it. They might not think it unconsciously. Maybe it helps them or adds to their, visit. But that was one of the ones I think that kind of was probably the most talked about.
Made the right decision. Let me just
thank you.
Submit that as a comment. You made the right decision.
Yeah, thanks.
I mean, I can't even, that shouldn't even be a debate. But I didn't even know that was the case. But hearing it,
well, because you get caught up on the building costs. You're like, well, wait a minute, are we really going to dedicate 100 square feet of this building to spend more money instead of earning more money out of that space? So it does kind of get into that back and forth on that. But it was, do we have linen napkins or paper napkins? Do we have stainless steel ramekins or plastic ones? The silverware, how heavy is the silverware? Those glassware or plastic cups. So those are like the kind of like low-lying fruit where, like we talked about. And I'm like, where do we want to be? Because all of those things are more expensive than the option that we did not go with. So, but I think it does lend itself to the entire experience for a guest. I still have, so I told you, my oldest son got heavy silverware here, Dad. This is going to be a good restaurant. And
is that your 10-year-old?
22.
22. Okay. Yeah. I was going to say.
So I'm different than you. I got 22 to 10. So
10's your youngest.
10's my youngest. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, but there's still that attention to detail is important. And I think all of my partners and I have it. Probably I'd say once a month I get a photo message from former managers or staff members showing me a picture of a half full salt shaker from wherever they're dining. And they say, someone's not paying attention to full salt and pepper shakers. I'm like, is that the only thing you're remembering from me?
Well, I think it's great.
That's my legacy. So
passing those lessons on to your 22-year-old and your 10-year-old, that's really cool. They're noticing that. Clearly they're picking up on this. They're making the comments about the weight of the silverware. I mean, it matters. It matters. It does matter. And it makes a difference. That's why people want to go, there are choices out there. There are options. I was going to ask you too, I don't want to forget this one, but somebody's going to DC Oakes, somebody's going to the Penrose. What do they have to order? What do you order? You're a foodie.
Oh man, I wouldn't say I'm a foodie. I appreciate all kinds of meals. That salmon salad is definitely a fan favorite. Yeah. I think our burger program is really, really strong. Tony Gray is our chef. He's got to have cooked over 2 or 3 million pieces of burgers, steaks, and fish. It's just, he is a workhorse. And he created that menu. But, another thing is like, we have a brioche bun. It's the best bun for a hearty burger. And can we get a cheaper bun? Yes. But that brioche bun, there's something special about it. And so, we kind of really want to make sure our burgers are great. But, the ribeye that we have at DC Oakes was the same cut that we had at Sonny's. So I think it's the best steak in town. And there's some great steaks in town, but I really think the ribeye at DC Oakes is remarkable. The ribs are awesome. The wings, probably eat wings. I don't know. I'm embarrassed to say it. Probably 3 or 4 nights a week, I'll take home a dozen wings and I'll share them with my 20-year-old and my 17-year-old daughter. And we'll have wings at 8 or 9 at night and just talk about the day. Everyone gets 4 wings. But yeah, there's some, I think it's the menu strong. And like you said, you can go healthy, you can have a little bit of fun and cheat on your diet a little bit if you need to. Same with Penrose. And the menus are similar, but, it's funny. We had one guy come in and he says, it was a great compliment. And he was dining by himself in the bar area about 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon. And he said, I was at this restaurant downtown in Fort Collins yesterday. And I got to tell you, I can't decide which is my favorite. And I said, oh, what's that? And he says, it's called Penrose Taphouse. And I said, He goes, do you know those guys? And I said, I do. But it was kind of neat. Yeah. Cause I was like, oh, that's awesome to have some of that consistency. between the two, but they do both have their own identity. And the plaza at the Exchange where where Penrose is, it is just so nice to be on that interior patio. And the line for the ice cream shop is through the gates out to College. It's a nice summer night down there. It's, there's kids running around. Of course there's dogs because we're in Fort Collins. There's dogs everywhere. We're such a dog friendly community. It's just a great, cool vibe down there. And that's kind of like that downtown vibe, And it's funny because I remember Josh Guernsey. So he's done it twice, but at Oakes, I was driving up from Denver one night and working for Potts, and I had just gotten to the point. I'm like, all right, I gotta make the jump. I gotta do this. And I was driving down Harmony Road, and there was a field. I can't remember if it was corn or straw or hay or something, but it said retail restaurant, Josh Guernsey. And I said, oh, I know him. And he was the president of the board for my wife's foundation, Ram Strength. And I said, so I called him, and that was probably 2 years before we even opened Oakes. It took a long time, but fast forward, and Oakes had been open maybe a year and a half or so. And Josh called me and said, what do you think about doing a mini Oakes in a container down at the Exchange? And I'm like, well, Josh, everyone knows Old Town ends on LaPorte. Like, no one is crossing over College to get down to create the next deal. But he knows. He like you said earlier, he knows what we don't know.
Right.
And that vision was awesome because we didn't do the container. And then you had another thing where you had one vacancy, and then he called back. He says, hey, I think we can get you this 2-unit, 2-suite deal if you guys want to come look at it. And then when we went and looked at it, like, I think that's when the light went on for us. And we said, hey, we could do this. This could be a pretty cool setup for us.
Well, I remember being involved with the Exchange early on with Josh and others, and being involved in Harmony Commons early on with Josh and others. Josh was always a huge advocate for you guys. And then it was easy for anyone else to kind of be an advocate when they would get to know you and get to know your concept and get to know your background. So, I mean, amazing seeing those two things come together. And yeah, those are great spots, great real estate.
Yeah.
But, Josh is brilliant in that commercial real estate world at recognizing not only the good locations, but also the operators. And it takes both of those things.
Yeah, I think
so. When you marry the two and you have them, then it just really, really starts to take off. And, to your point, and, Josh saw it years ago, things moving further north there at the Exchange project, and really things also moving further southeast on Harmony than they had before at Harmony Commons, where DC Oakes is located.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's been fun to watch that take off. And I think, really speaks to just the increasing demand for, good restaurants for lunch, dinner. So, I mean, where does it go from here? You've been a lot of places. You've worked other places, larger markets, some of these places you mentioned earlier in the conversation. Where do you think Fort Collins goes from here as a restaurant city? A lot we've established, a lot different, a lot better. It's come a long ways from where it was at in the 90s.
Sure.
Today, so many more options. The service, just everything is just really dialed. I mean, the places that stay here are phenomenal. How do you see that evolving? I mean, if you were going to, predict the next 10, 20 years, is there a comp? Is there a place that you've gone out to dinner, maybe a larger city, that you think Fort Collins is trending towards?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. There's probably a few factors I think that would go into it. And one of them is probably in your wheelhouse. It's the real estate. So I had a chance to meet with Steve Taylor, who owns Austin's and Moot House and Big Al's, and he's pretty remarkable operator in the city. And when I was talking to him, he talked about opening up Austin's downtown, and Old Town was dead. And I think back then, I'm like, well, I'm sorry, what? Like, he goes, no one went there. And I was like, how is that possible to even wrap your head around in 2024 that Old Town, no one was going to Old Town.
Well, people listening to this, how long ago was that conversation with Steve Taylor? Because people probably think that was longer ago than it actually was.
Yeah, so I think I spoke to him probably, that was probably 3 or 4 years ago. But when they opened Austin's, that was, is it 25 or it had to be 30 years ago?
Yeah, so
he took that risk. Yeah, he took the risk and did it. And
30 years ago, nobody wanted, it was just downtown and nobody wanted to.
Probably the Rio, which the Rio, I love the Rio. I want to get the code. What is it? It is everybody knows the Rio. If you have someone come into town, I guarantee 90% of the people in this, we got to go to the Rio, have a margarita. It's a cool vibe. Those guys do a great job. They got great staff. They've got to be 35 to 40 years in that location.
They have things like, there's a 3. Is there still a 3 margarita limit?
There should be.
There should be. If there's not. There was at one time.
There should be a 2 margarita limit for me on some nights.
I would agree.
It's that area there, but they took a risk. They opened up a restaurant. The real estate was affordable. The rent was affordable. How do you open up now in our city and get profitable? Because you have to come to the table with a pretty sizable chunk of change to get things going. And there's no guarantees. And I would say if anyone is thinking about opening a restaurant that hasn't been in a restaurant as an employee or anything, come work with me for a month. And then you can get a fair chance to say, I either like it or I hate it. And, that's that. But I think the other component, aside from the cost of being able to open a restaurant, would be what is the next culinary trend. And, for DC Oakes and Penrose, we're pretty much right down the middle of the fairway. We do have some different fun, recipes that we like to do. But there's a tremendous, gluten-free community. And so we need to make sure that we're able to educate our staff, know what we're doing so that we can, welcome them. Vegan and the impossible, the meatless products, fake meat or impossible, that's a thing, and I think that's going to continue to probably grow and get some traction under it. But it's hard to think about, what's the next step. We should probably ask Josh Guernsey. He seems to have a crystal ball about where things are going. I don't necessarily see myself and my partners doing something new. It's when we opened Penrose, we started construction in the fall of 2019. And of course, COVID happened in early 2020. And that was, I think that still left a mark on our psyches a little bit, because there was some sleepless nights through those months trying to just figure out, hey, are we going to be able to make this? Because we are on the hook for this. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, we were able to kind of navigate with some help and, a great GC and some other folks that were able to, help us. My fifth partner is Henry Fang, and he's just a awesome partner to have. A super guy, got a great business background, and was able to really help us, figure out, hey, how can we really get the most out of every dollar we're spending in these projects. So it was a little bit of, like I said, it left a little mark in the psyche that I think we're probably just going to stay in with our 2 spots and just try to make them as best we can.
This is recorded, so we might come back to this later and just show you. You said you were only going to do 2. I think there might be more, but the 2 are amazing. We've talked about those, you. And for people that want to check those out, I think just what's the best way for people to find your 2 restaurant concepts online? Is it just search the names on Google?
DC Oakes Brewhouse.com and Penrose Taphouse.com. They're easy to get to and easy to find. I think for both restaurants, one of the best values we have is our happy hour. So we do Monday through Friday from 3 to 6, we do happy hour. And it's a $3 draft, any beer. We got 20 beers on tap from some great breweries in town, $4 well drinks and $5 house wines. So it is kind of funny because there's sometimes we have the upstairs at DC Oakes and I'll be doing an orientation or I might have a meeting and usually try to schedule them between lunch and dinner around 3:00, but I'll come down from a meeting at like 3:30 and I'll be like, does anyone in the city have a job? And if I'm happy you're here, but it does bring them in. So that's a good one. And then, if you got kids, you got the Kids Eat Free Tuesdays at DC Oakes and Kids Eat Free Wednesdays at Penrose. So those are both really cool to have, just a bunch of kids running around and families.
And they really eat free. I mean, it's like, there's a real kids menu there. So I almost said that earlier in the conversation. It's like, I don't know if they still do that, but it's what other place does that? I mean, that's
well, and
incredible.
I think we did want to get aggressive with some of that because we had worked at other places where it was kids eat for $1 and can we just like eat the last dollar, so we did that, and I can't see us changing that too soon. But, it's funny because we'll have just different stories about kids and you don't realize, but like the next generation of Oakes guests and Penrose guests are children. And it's cool because my 20-year-old son, he comes back from school and he's like, are we going to Oakes for dinner? And he'll bring all his buddies from school with him. And it's kind of fun that he's a fan of the business now. Of course, he'd asked me when he must have been in middle school when we were trying to get everything put together. He's like, when's it going to open? When's it going to open? And I was like, next year. I probably said next year for 3 years. So he's definitely had to be patient and do that. But, it's just fun to see just a lot of families. And I talked about, you see, when I was at Potts, we had people on dates that are now married with kids. We had a family call us 5 years ago and they said, hey, Gerard, can you do some kind of gender reveal? We're going to come in for dinner tonight. We have 3 daughters. My wife's pregnant, and can you make a cake or something, like get a piece of cake or do something for us? And I said, yeah, I'd totally do that. And we had a sous chef at the time, Kelly Dennison, and she baked them a cake in like 4 hours, baked a cake, frosted it, and put the frosting, colored the frosting on the inside of the cake. And they had their meal. And at the end of it, I cut it open. Well, it was pink again. But the cool thing was on Saturday or Sunday, I was at Oakes and I met a friend for a beer, and this guy walks in with his daughter. She's 5 years old. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, is she 5? I go, felt like 2 weeks ago, or a year ago that we just did your gender reveal. He's like, I know, it's been 5 years. So it's kind of a cool, it's a special place for them, and they're a special family for us.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, that's a complete Danny Meyer move too, by the way, when you're talking about hospitality. And, I don't know if people listening even know who Danny Meyer is. Very famous, well-known restaurateur, New York City, multiple concepts. Wrote a book called Setting the Table, and reading that book, I mean, that's it, like how people feel. So somebody called who, they got the founder, the operator, the guy who just made it happen, this reveal for them, special moment for their family. And yeah, then you're just recognizing them 5 years later and remembering that moment. So.
Yeah. And it was neat, but yeah, great family. And it was a fun day Sunday, and it was a fun day 5 years ago. Yeah.
So where do you go? We'll start kind of wrapping this up shortly, but we've talked a lot about your concepts in town. Where do you go out to eat when you are not going there? Let's give some love to some other restaurants in the community, because there's some other great restaurants.
Well, I got to go to CB Potts at Collindale Golf Course. They got a great patio, and Kevin's spot. my homeboy. So they do a good job. Like to go over there. Austin's is great. The Rio.
Yeah.
Seen a pattern here.
Yeah. All the OGs.
Yeah. The other one that we like to go to is, and we celebrate our staff that started with us day one every year, but we took them out to Ginger Baker. And you know what? It was just a really remarkable experience. It always is. They do a great job. And I can appreciate that coming from Sonny's when they were opening and a competitor when I was at Sonny's. But I think I heard the other day, you know, comparison is the thief of joy. And I was like, you know what? There's enough restaurants in this town to just appreciate them all.
Absolutely.
And so I enjoyed Ginger and Baker. Michelle and I, we went there not too long ago and had just an awesome night. So that was cool. And then Zwei Brewery.
Great choice.
Love those guys. So Kirk.
So you guys know ZWEI Brewery. Google that, check it out in South Fort Collins.
And Kirk was a Potts guy too. So Kirk was at Potts 20 years, and he probably left about 2 years before I did from CB Potts. But he's just, and we were over there a couple of days ago, and Michelle and I grabbed a beer. But he's just such a great guy, and he gave me great advice back in the day because it was a hot day in Fort Collins, and the air conditioning or the swamp cooler wasn't working. So we had to call someone. He goes, well, you know, if you go up there and ask them what they're doing, you get a free lesson. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, they'll tell you how they're fixing it. I was like, I love that. And that stuck with me. Yeah. So I know just enough to be dangerous on heating and cooling right now. But yeah, loves why. I mean, Odell's patio, remarkable. New Belgium. If people had like one day in Fort Collins, I'd say go to Oakes, go to Penrose, go to New Belgium. It's just like you can totally get the flavor of the city from those restaurants. Odell's also. Yeah, where do you like to go?
All of those are really great ones. You know, I'd probably throw in, we might, Sarah and I might do Little, Little on Mountain. If we're doing a date night or brunch, we like that spot for brunch as well. But really all the ones you mentioned that, if we're in the mood for seafood, we'll check out Jack's. Jack's has a nice, really seasoned menu.
Yeah.
And just good service too. And just good energy.
Yeah.
So those are some of our favorites. The Country Club is a place that we eat too, that the chef, as you know.
So I was out there my daughter was out there taking prom pictures. And I told Michelle, so she goes off with her friends with the prom for Fort Collins High School. And I told Michelle, I go, well, let's go in here and see what TR's cooking up. And we sat at the bar and had a drink, but it was just, he is so good.
He's so
good and such a good dude. But I would also throw in breakfast. Silver Grill is just,
how did I forget that? Lucille's. If you really want to, not have to eat again until dinner, like hit Lucille's.
Like just go and have coffee and beignets. That's it.
There's just a huge play of the order the farmer's eggs.
Yeah.
You're not going to be hungry until dinner time. Like Lucille's is a great New Orleans style breakfast.
It is.
But Silver Grill, how could I forget Silver Grill? And that's a place you hear a lot.
He's such a great operator and a good guy. He's like,
absolutely.
You just have this confidence going in that you're going to have a great experience, So yeah, lots of great operators in this city.
One thing that's just really striking me now too, as we're talking about these great operators, and one thing that I think sets Fort Collins apart from other areas is that all of these people who founded these restaurants, who operate these restaurants, I could go drive by their house right now. You probably knock on their door and they probably talk to you. It's different than other places, right? I mean, it's very local. It's very homegrown. I mean, we're talking about, Ginger Graham. Her and Jack, they put, I don't know how much they spend on putting Christmas lights up every season.
Are they off Lake LeMay there?
I mean, it's this amazing thing. And they invite all of Fort Collins to walk through their yard and enjoy the Christmas lights. That's the cool type of community this is. And it's just rare. And I don't think it's exemplified anywhere better than it is in the restaurant industry when you look at these operators.
And I think the other component on that is, can kind of illustrate it from COVID, is we were shut down. There was some to-go food that we were allowed to do, And I think it was the Bohemian Foundation started it, but worked with Steve Taylor and Alan at Austin's and Mood House. And they got, I don't know, 4 or 5 restaurants to commit. And Odell delivered, we would put together these meals for folks that needed meals during COVID, that were shut in, that might have been on school lunches for the kids or whatever it was. And we would go in at probably like 8 in the morning. Alan was like a systems guy that had like recipes done. This is the container, the lid, this is the portion for each one. And we would do probably like 600 of those about 4 days a week in the morning. And it was, I think Bohemian paid us like $5 or $6 per meal. Wow. But it was, Odell's would have their beer trucks out because they weren't delivering beer, to any of the on-premise places. They would come pick up everything. It was refrigerated. It would go out to however it was distributed. But that was really cool to be a part of that in our restaurant community, because I didn't know those guys hardly at all. And it was good for us, gave some of our staff a few hours to, be able to come in and do something. And it was just like a great way for Fort Collins to kind of support Fort Collins. Mm-hmm. But it was a kind of one of those things that kind of makes you proud to be in business in Fort Collins.
Yeah, it makes you proud to live here too, and just be a part of the community. Mm-hmm. I think there's just people supporting other people in big and small ways.
Yeah,
I mean, when we started chatting earlier, you're just mentioning like, hey, great time. You did a good job at the the Firecracker 4K, this race on the 4th of July. That was great for my ego, and just it makes me feel good that you recognize that, and just seeing each other. We're all doing this race on that morning of the 4th, and then hanging out in the huge city park afterwards.
Yeah.
These are things that are not normal.
It's not. Yeah. And it's my partner, Steve, who runs Penrose. He's like, it's a little big town. Like, it's a big city, but it still is very local. And you probably go out every time you go out to lunch or dinner, you're going to run into somebody that you can say hi to and, have a quick chat with. So, it is a special place. It's funny because I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in Concord, Massachusetts, 14,000 people. It is a very historical, small little suburb of Boston. But every time I go back there, there's probably like a couple things that just like jump out at you. One of them is how small the sky is, because there's so many trees. But they have all the utilities in Fort Collins are underground. And I think it took me, 3 years till I was like, oh, that's what it is. You don't have any overhead wires here. So you never lose power when there's a snowstorm or anything. And
you're the second person to mention that, by the way.
Oh, really?
I hadn't known. I hadn't noticed. I've lived here since 2005.
Yeah.
And now I notice.
Yeah.
So.
And then the other thing, I tell people, there's a bike lane on every street in this city. It's awesome. And I'm not a huge cyclist, but it's great because I know hey, if my kids are on bikes, they're safe. If, our staff is getting back and forth to work, or if I want to go down to the park, there's a bike lane to stay in and stuff. So those are all really cool things about our city that you don't notice it, but it's there, and it's kind of a neat thing that just kind of ties into that little big city.
Well, and if you get really good with the maps and everything, you hop on the Poudre Trail, it connects to the Power Trail. To your point, amazing bike lanes, super bike friendly. And, if you really want nature, you can hop on these trails and you can get from point A to point B to point C. Sarah and I did a ride last summer, all the way from, Old Town to Southeast. And then we had to, do a connector thing, but we went all the way to Greeley, Northern Colorado, and had, rode all the way down there and connected with where the trail picks up again. Eventually, we're a few years away from it being completely connected all throughout Northern Colorado. But if you're trying to get around Fort Collins, around the city, it's amazing, underpasses, overpasses. Mm-hmm. It's totally tucked in and hidden, but you could be on a beautiful bike trail, much of it, beside a river. Certainly beside trees. It's unbelievable. It's like right out of a movie. So it's nice to have somebody to talk about Fort Collins with here, because of course, when I'm talking with people, oftentimes it's clients and they might think I'm a bit biased being in real estate, but
they can call me.
Yeah.
I'm not in real estate.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, thank you for your time. This has been great.
You bet. Yeah, and I was happy to come spend an afternoon here and chat with you about Fort Collins.
Yeah, it feels like we were just hanging out, having a happy hour or something, just sitting in this nice condo here in the heart of Old Town.
Yeah.
And just, I don't even know how long we were talking. It was a while, and it was super valuable information. I think people are going to appreciate it. I know I do. I learned some things and can't wait to get out and eat again. I'll mention to people too. It's, you said, just the community feel. And I would say over half the times I've been sitting and eating at either the Penrose in Old Town or DC Oakes in Southeast Fort Collins, you've stopped by and said hi personally. And that's neat.
Yeah.
That's really,
it's a fun business to be in. Yeah.
It's really cool to just have that connection with you. Appreciate your concepts. Can't wait to get back out there again soon. And thanks again for doing this. We really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Greg.
Okay.
Thanks, man.
You bet.